I'm ready.
I love it. It's great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out for the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to do it.
Yeah, me too. So let's get into your world of writing. And to begin with, probably one of the biggest shapeshifters we've lived through recently is getting through this pandemic. How did
Right.
that alter your business, and how has those ripples in the pond continue to affect the way that you do things now?
It's a great question because honestly, the pandemic changed everything for me,
Yeah.
but in a really good way. I mean, in terms of writing wise. So, I'm a writer and I also teach writing at USC. I teach screenwriting and I've been there for almost 20 years. Um, but when the pandemic came and we moved online, and so I had all these, young people who were like 19, 20 and were doing this online for the first time. And they were catatonic. And, I'd see their parents walking around in the back, and they were just, and I thought, okay, this is not going to be good.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I continued on this path, I would quit teaching. It was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
And so I started to think, well, the first person I need to entertain is myself because I'm locked in here. So what would be fun? And I came up with this idea because remember, we were supposed to be in like for 6 weeks or something.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to do a class for 6 weeks and it'll be six people for 6 weeks, but I don't want to teach writing because number one, I don't really believe you. I mean, an adult, you can't teach writing. I mean, if you don't know how to write by now, you need to go back to first grade. There's nothing I'm going to do to help you.
Sure.
So, what I did, I thought, well, what would be really fun? And I created a class that all revolves around movies, television, theater, reading. And every week, people get a different assignment, which is to open up a different aspect of their voice. So that rather than just writing, like, typing away on your computer or doing things like that, you might just spontaneously tell a story. You might tell a story graphically. You'll tell a story maybe only through dialogue. So you're using and doing things that you've never done before. And it, I had no, I mean, I thought, okay, this is great for 6 weeks. Well, I had no idea how much I'd love it. And I also had no idea how much anyone else would love it. So last month marked my 5th year.
Wow.
So and I have people from all over the world. It's really, really fun. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody goes, I can't believe how much fun this is because it's really about showing people how to get out of their own way. Because that's the problem with everything. That's a problem with any creative pursuit, is that what's happening is you're in your way. You've decided somehow, I can't do this, I can't do this. Well, maybe I could do that. Or maybe I can't do anything.
Yeah.
But you don't think, I'll try. And what if it works out? What if it's a mess? So what? Then you
Yeah.
won't do it again.
Yeah.
But so that's really the attitude that I wanted to bring. And I'm very referential. So I like to use, movies and books and other things to explain to people like what's going on. Why did they make this decision versus that decision? So people are learning things in terms of storytelling, but they're not learning it in a very kind of traditional way.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have started as a result of it, like doing things that they never imagined. I have one woman who is now doing in Los Angeles, we had these kind of like spoken word stories, and she's done a number of them on stage. She'd never done anything like that before. I have somebody else who just finished a graphic novel. She'd never even seen a graphic novel before she
Wow.
came to the class. And now she's finished it, and it was excerpt in the Times of London magazine.
Wow.
So, I mean, people can do so much more than they think they could do. And that's what the whole thing is about. So that's why for me, the pandemic, to my amazement, really, to find some other thing that I really enjoy doing at my age is really a fun thing too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I'm curious, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? Was it always writing?
Never.
Okay.
Ne The last thing I would have put on the list is writing. I would have been way too self-conscious. It never even dawned on me. And
Yeah.
the only reason I started writing was because I was in therapy and sort of dealing with what did I want to do with my life? Because I really had never had what we would think of like as some ambition. I never thought, well, I want to be this or I just never thought about it. And then suddenly I was an adult and had to think about it.
Yeah.
But I really didn't know. So I was dealing with it in therapy, and I decided I was going to go back and take random classes at the university where I graduated just to sort of try things on and see what it would be like. And I had previously had a short stint in radio news. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go back into broadcasting.
Yeah,
And back in those days, there was no internet. You got this really thick book from the university, and you went through and you read and you picked out the classes that way. And they were never, the classes never lined up
yeah,
with what the, and it's still true. But university, I teach things and I look at it in online and go, but that's not what I'm teaching.
yeah,
But it was, so I thought it was a journalism class, and it turned out to be an advanced playwriting class. I'd never even, I mean, I'd probably at that point in my life, I'd only seen a half dozen plays. I lived in Michigan. It wasn't a big theater town.
yeah,
And I thought, well, I got to get out of this class. And I went up to the professor afterwards and I said, you're not going to see me next week. I don't want you to be offended, but I'm in here by mistake.
yeah.
So I'm not coming back. And she convinced me to stay. She said, you're here already. What's the, just so, and I thought, here I am going to therapy, trying to get myself out of doing things I don't want to do, find what I want to do. And now I'm doing something I don't want to please somebody else.
Yeah.
So we had this assignment, which was to go home and write a scene. I didn't know what a scene was. I mean, I thought, well, I know what people sound like. I mean, I talk, other people talk. I'll just write that.
Yeah.
And as a result of, to make a long story longer, I ended up writing a play that became a finalist in this very prestigious National Playwriting Award. And suddenly, that was the moment when that letter came, I went, oh my God, because it's like someone thought of me differently. And then
Yeah.
I thought, I could do that. And I love doing it. So suddenly it seemed like, oh, that's, the meaning of it, how it came to be.
So what were the early seeds that were planted into you that finally were harvested when this epiphany hit you? What were the things that were going on early on that made this become a reality?
I really always was really into movies, really into television. And like, I mean, but not just, I mean, everybody watches TV, everybody goes, but I mean, like, took it really sort of seriously. Even when I was a little kid, I would write away and get scripts to read, and I love reading and I love stories. And one of the things I realized in this process that when I was growing up, I was a difficult adolescent. And I mean, I really was rebellious. And one of the things I was really good at was lying. I would lie to my parents. I would make up these and if you caught me, I would just pivot and pick up a different thread and go in a new direction. I felt really comfortable with that. And I realized, I mean, it's kind of what you do when you're writing. You just sort of go with it. So that has not ever been something that I found terribly intimidating. I mean, I think I knew I had a good imagination. I loved to play with dolls when I was a little girl and make up these elaborate tales. I love stories. I love listening to people's stories. And, I just think, what's more interesting than hearing somebody's story?
Yeah.
So it just is, it's really just been such a gift.
What was the first book growing up that you read that really like opened the door for you to want to read more, that planted some seeds in you?
It's going to sound silly, but I was really into Nancy Drew books. I was
Yeah.
obsessed with Nancy Drew books. I literally would go and wait until the next shipment, like when they were still putting them out, and I was like waiting for the next installment.
Yeah. So, who's been kind of a hero for you, whether it's literary or otherwise? Who's been that inspiration for you in your career?
Well, certainly the person that got me writing, which is a woman who sadly is now deceased. Her name was Esther Broner, and she was a professor, but she was also a novelist and a playwright from Michigan, very highly regarded. So she certainly has been an inspiration to me. And I think probably anyone who started late and reinvented themselves has been, is an inspiration to me. I love people who don't use age or see age as a limit.
Yeah.
And Esther was like that. I mean, I'd never met anyone, even when she was in her 80s. I mean, she had the spirit of a teenager. I mean, she was always willing to go anywhere, to do anything, to try anything. Um, One of my other heroes is Lily Tomlin, who also just happens to be a friend. Not trying to name drop here, but she's the most amazing human being. I mean, who there's absolutely no boundaries. She's willing to try anything. So people like that.
The other day, my wife and I were talking about The Incredible Shrinking Woman, and we were just talking about that era of movie. And I remember there was a guy when I was in my 20s. We used to all go to this place in downtown Kansas City called Crown Center. And there was a guy named Wes Winters, and now he's in Vegas doing shows. But he was a piano player and he would play. And he'd always have stories. We'd always go watch him, and he was very flamboyant, had a real Liberace bone about him. And we were like, what's the coolest story of somebody you ran into here? Because that's where everybody that was, upper tier in society would stay. And he was like, one time Lily Tomlin came in and she always loved to come and see me and she loved it. And I always think about that, she just seems like that kind of person that would just kick back
Completely.
and and
Completely.
and watch a guy play the piano in a hotel in Kansas City.
Well, and the reason I know her is because she and my husband went to school together when they were 8.
Wow.
So that's the kind of person that really says the kind of person that she is.
Yeah.
And the thing about stories is that everybody has them.
Yep.
I mean, it's not like, you can talk to your next door neighbor and they go, just, I got nothing to say, nothing ever, because that's really the thing that separates everybody is their unique story, how they see the world. That's honestly the only thing we've got. Everything else we all can, there's always someone that can sing a better song, run faster than you, sink a basket when you can. But what's unique about you are your own experiences. And when you embrace that, it really can change your life because that doesn't mean you have to become a writer.
Right.
But understanding that about yourself really translates into so many other things. It's
Yeah.
not just about writing.
Yeah, right. No, and you're totally right. Like I hear people when I bring up, like writing something, they're like, "Oh, I can't do that. I don't have a story to tell." It's like, "Yeah, you do. Yeah, we all do."
And you do it the other thing is you're doing it all the time.
Uh-huh.
There's not a day of your life where you're not communicating with someone and revealing something.
Yeah.
One of the common things I always hear, which is my favorite line, when people go, but I just can't write dialogue. And I say, but how is that Think about that.
Yeah.
If there's one thing that you could do, it would ha that's what you do all day. You've been
Yeah.
doing it since you're probably a year and a half. How could you listen to it, you hear it? That's the thing you can do. But because it's not something you do in daily life, and
Yep.
suddenly now you're focused on it, and it suddenly starts to feel artificial. But nothing could be easier, really, once you get out of that headspace than writing dialogue.
Yeah.
That's why when it came to the play, I could see right then and there, okay, I would have a hard time with other things, but talking, that's easy.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this, of all of the movies, being a movie buff, what's your favorite screenplay? What do you think is the most well executed screenplay that you've always enjoyed or maybe harken back to?
Well, you have to understand, I like really heavy stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, there are things that I like that are light and fun and all of that.
Yeah.
But like I love Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, I think is amazing.
It's great.
One of my favorite films is actually a German film called Lives of Others, which to me is not only one of the most amazing films, the most amazing script, is it's also truly one of the most important films because it's all about what happened in Germany with the Stasi, which is so sort of parallel to what's going on in our country. So, I mean, the parallels are astonishing. And I mean, it's the perfect example how every story has to be personal. I mean, even if you're writing a political story, I mean, there's no polemics in this. I
Yeah.
mean, there's absolutely no discussion about politics. I mean, it's all done through character and how the world impacts character. So that's what stories are really about. Stories are about people. I mean, we're doing the same exact thing in this moment. But my guess is when we get off this, and if we were relaying the conversation to our friend, it wouldn't sound the same
Right.
because
No.
we're not the same. And that's what people, if you could just realize that that's your gift, that's the one thing that separates you from everybody else that nobody can take away from you. And it's just part of you. But we have this thing about writing because it was something we learned in school and it came with, you needed a preposition here or this is wrong and that really stuck.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Who's one of your favorite storytellers?
Oh gosh, I just saw this movie. yes, I mean, there's so many. I just saw a film yesterday at a screening called Small Things Like These, which was a Booker Prize nomination of a book, and that was amazing.
Yeah.
Clara Keegan's a wonderful, wonderful writer. Um, I love now suddenly I can't think of one writer.
Right. It's
Now,
flooding.
wait a minute.
It's your
Don
brains are flooding.
DeLillo, love Don
Oh
DeLillo.
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Who else? Used to read a lot of John Irving.
Yeah.
Um, let's see who's in my book list. I mean, I always have a list ready to go because my Kindle's always on. I just read a wonderful book called Loved and Lost. Um, I think that Edna O'Brien, she's a wonderful writer. I've started reading her recently. I just read the book that won the National Book Prize called Martyrs. That was amazing.
Have you read Miranda July?
Yes, I read all fours.
I'm in the middle of it right now, and it's like, wow, like that's crazy. And it took her a long time to write that book, but the ways that she can get into the human mind and the psychology and storytelling, and she narrates everything, it's amazing how she does that.
She's also really brave.
Oh, she's an enormously crazy brave.
Crazy brave. And I have to say, I mean, it's one of the things, I mean, I know just personally, I always struggle with my writing. I mean, you have to be really, to be that good, you have to be really brave and you have to be really secure in that brave because
Uh-huh.
she's somebody that if the book had been a flop, I mean, I'm sure she'd have felt badly about it, but it wouldn't have stopped her.
Yeah. No, 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 no. She's a force. She's
She's
an
a force.
overall creative force for
Yeah,
sure.
she really, really is. So she's definitely somebody.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of who else I can put on that list that I've read lately that I don't know if you've read Tahiti Coates,
Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
pretty an amazing writer.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
It always amazes me when I go into a bookstore or if I, look online to get a book on my Kindle, how many unbelievably fantastic good books there are.
You know. I know. I saw a number recently about the number because self-publishing's so big, the number of
Right.
books that are published every day. It's unbelievable. It's like hundreds and hundreds and thousands every day. It's crazy. It's just like the market's flooded.
So people must be reading a lot more than we think they are. And
Yeah.
that's another thing I think about COVID. I can think of like, I mean, like I know I've always been a reader, but as a result of COVID, where I got like really a lot of reading, now, I mean, I probably read twice as much as I
Yeah.
used to.
Well, and I think too the audio explosion with podcasting and audiobooks, I think that's just
Yes.
been a huge
Yes.
boom. And I think just like you're saying, the art of storytelling, I think it's becoming something we've returned to some roots. I've noticed that with jazz, having a jazz radio
Yes.
show, there's a lot of people during that time that went to like really more aggro things instead of computer AI generated things. And what's more aggro than jazz and organic, I mean, it's improv, it's
Oh,
all these classical instruments. It's like it's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Jazz is,
Yeah, it is.
and it is. It really is. If you, in some ways, I think maybe the freest kind of expression
Yeah.
because it's always like evolving in the moment.
Yeah. It's the antithesis of claustrophobia is what it is.
Yeah, I really see that.
Yeah.
I think the other thing about whether you pick up an instrument or you take a writing class or you do something is that it opens you up to doing other things. So one of my favorite books is the Patti Smith book, Just Kids. Have you read that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I found it incredibly inspirational.
Yeah.
And I was really sort of in this dry period creatively. And I read this book, and when I was done, I went, I'm going to do something amazing. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to try something. I'm going to be bold.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to go on the sub, pick up a bottle cap and make it into art. And
Yeah.
I thought, well, what am I going to do? So I went through like all the things. Maybe I'll go back and play the piano. And I realized, no, I don't have it anymore in
Yeah.
me for that kind of practice.
Yeah.
So I thought I wanted to do something creative that I'd never done. So I took a painting class and I loved it. And now, like I've been doing it now for 10 years and I've sold a bunch of stuff and had a couple shows. And people say to me, oh my God, you have all this talent. But you know what? That's not really it. That doesn't mean that maybe I don't have a modicum of talent, but a lot of people do. When you like something and you do it, you get better at it. It's
Yeah.
just not a surprise. I think that people think, I mean, believe me, the first thing I did, you wouldn't have looked at and said, oh, she's got talent. I think she should
Uh-huh.
stick with this. I had no fucking idea.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter because what got me back the next week wasn't thinking to myself, I'm gonna have an art show. Quite the opposite. I thought this looks ridiculous, but you know what? It was so fun to do. I'm gonna
That's
do
it.
it
That's it.
again.
I'm a visual artist. This is my original behind me, and
I was
I have
gonna ask you that because I love that.
thank you. Yeah, I have shows in Kansas City, and I paint all the time, and I find it to be therapeutic. You know, it's that Malcolm.
Totally.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the Malcolm Gladwell idea of 10,000 hours, you become a master. It's that idea. It's like you just do it because you're doing it. And if you do it long enough, you're going to figure things out. And if you're curious enough, you just orchestrate it in a different way. And that's it. It's just like an entrepreneur. It's like a writer. It's like anything. When you figure out what
Absolutely.
works, you do it. When you figure out what you don't do, that's just it. It's being a human.
It's so true. And these are like the kind of things I wished I knew when I was like 21.
I
You know,
know.
by now I would have had like 100 different careers.
I know. It's like the Benjamin Buttons thing. Like, why can't we do that?
I
Why,
know, I know,
why
I
can't we
know.
go backwards? So I got to ask you a question. As somebody that loves words and storytelling and books, does the word moist bother you? What is this whole thing about that word that everybody gets upset about that word?
What word?
Moist. Everybody gets weird. They think it's
Moist?
moist. People think it's a weird word, and everybody has this aversion to it lately. It's a
Really?
modern phenomenon.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
Look, I
well,
I deal with words. I've never heard that, and I'm in LA. But
yeah.
moist, I don't know. Maybe
It
there's
It's weird. Google it and just see what people are saying because it's a very
really.
strange phenomenon. But I just thought I would broach it. So
Did it get picked up somewhere? Maybe like on the internet, someone said something. It had to be like one of those.
it was like a Colbert thing. Like one of those late night guys did it, took a pot shot, and everybody was like, "Oh, I have a problem with it." And it's like things that go viral. We don't know how, but it just
Don't know how or
explodes.
why. I
You
love
know?
him, by the way. He's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, those guys I think are bastions in this modern era right now. Like
They
Jimmy
really
Kimmel
are.
and all those guys, there's levels of them that I find have this tenet of the founding fathers. They're coming from this way of like, if we don't laugh, we're gonna cry. That's all there is to it,
Yeah.
you know?
It's really interesting seeing someone like Kimmel, who's been, I mean, Colbert has sort of been around in that incarnation for a long time, but Kimmel came from such a different place and has
Yeah.
grown and changed so much. It was very funny. I read this interview once with Sarah Silverman, and she said, why wasn't he this guy when I was with him?
Right, because he was feral. Like I remember him on Ben Stein's
Yes.
Money and when he did the
Yes.
Man Show. But once he got into here, like his wife did a monologue probably about a month ago, a few weeks before the election, and it threw shivers up my spine. It was so chilling. Just the way that she explained what was going on and how she felt, it was like, wow. So I think sometimes our times just vault people like Bob Dylan into positions that we never
Yeah.
knew existed,
I think
you
that's
know?
a really good point. It's really true.
Yeah, and they become bastions of that. So, of all of these things that you've done with your life and accomplished, what are you the proudest of?
That's a good question. Well, a lot of the things actually I'm proud of are things I did a long time ago in terms of activism. I was very active in the anti-Vietnam War movement and felt like I was someone along with millions of other people that made a difference there.
Yeah,
And the other thing I'm proud of my very first play. I'm proud of the fact that I've really kind of taken control of my life. I mean, I remember my parents when I was growing up, they would sit and I would hear, I was someone that always wanted to stay up late, like be the last person in bed. And I love listening to people's conversations. And my parents were always worrying about me that I was going to marry a gas station attendant and I would end up being, what they thought was something like bad, like a hairdresser, because here I was going to college and wasn't. So, I'm proud of myself for having risen above sort of even what I thought I
uh-huh.
could do. And I'm proud of that I'm somebody who takes chances, that I haven't let my own, insecurities get in my way.
Well, Charles Bukowski said that we're born geniuses and buried idiots. That's the problem with being an adult. We put all these fences up. We restrict ourselves. It's that wander, wonder thing. It's like you just got to keep it intact, you
Yeah.
know?
He has so many great quotes
Oh
about,
my God, that guy is
right?
just the whole
I
volume.
know.
So I remember one of the first jobs I had when I got out of college. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to get into journalism, and I ended up doing a uh, like graphic design for a home health agency. And I started working with this gal named Kate, and she was an old hippie from Massachusetts, and she was running the hospice consulting, and she just was a real cool person. But anyway, she did a lot of like protest against the Vietnam War and all of this. And she told me a story one time when I was flying to California. She said, I got on a flight one point and some guy that just was dressed like in an officious way sat down next to her and threw a manila envelope down. And she opened it up and it was all these pictures of her being taken by the FBI at all these rallies. And she was like, holy shit. So she got her bell rung pretty hard. But I always remember she was one of the coolest people in that early point in my life where I was like, wow, she was really in the soup. She was doing it. She was the one. And I don't think she stopped doing it. I think she probably pulled back a little bit, but she always had that activism bone about her, you know?
Yeah, yeah, me too. But I'm not active like I once was, and I had the same
Right.
thing with the FBI and the file. As a matter of fact, the first play I wrote, the one I was telling you about, that's what it was about because I didn't know anything else to write about. I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about anything else, and I
Yeah.
had just sort of come out of that experience, so I wrote about that.
Yeah.
I mean, they say, you write what you know,
That's
right?
it. That's
Yeah.
it.
I
And
mean, it wasn't it literally, but it was, that was the inspiration.
yeah. So let's tap into a little bit of this journalism that you've been involved with in your life. If you could interview one author right now or spend time with them and just pick their brain a little bit, who would you love to talk and interview with?
Well, remember, I mean, journalism for me was a long, long, long time ago.
Right, right.
Who would I really like to talk to now? I'd like to talk to Margaret Atwood.
Yeah,
I mean, she's somebody I'd really like to have a conversation with.
yeah,
Who else would I really like to have a conversation with? I actually wouldn't mind having a conversation with Miranda July because she's of such a different generation and sort of comparing stories that way.
yeah,
Um, I'd really like to interview somebody maybe like Gloria Steinem, who's been, for obvious reasons.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Especially now with everything that's going on and this reversion and like repeal of so many things. It's a very bizarre time. I never thought that we would get to a point where this kind of thing would be happening right now. It's
We're
such a
going
rampant.
backwards.
I
Yeah, we're going back
know.
to the dark ages.
I
I mean,
know.
it's really so it would be interesting to talk to people who I think who are older and have even a longer view than I have because I mean I can get really cynical and depressed and angry and I'm first to anger. That's sort of always my first response. Like, fuck you.
Yeah.
I've done all this thing and you don't appreciate it and
Yeah.
go starve.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but when I get into my bigger person moment, I would like to, come to some place where I feel like I can still make a difference
Yep.
and, move towards something positive.
Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight, you ran into the 18-year-old version of you, you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the wisdom you've accumulated. What advice would you impart on that young version of you?
Be fearless.
There you go.
Get out of your head. Try things. Embrace failure. I mean, what does it even mean to fail?
Yeah.
Honestly, we have this idea. I mean, you fail on probably every day of your life in some small, and you don't even think about it.
Yep.
It's the power that we've given certain concepts that really end up controlling our lives. I mean, so I mean, one of the things about, in storytelling lab, when I really work with people is putting that behind. I don't, there's, if you have a writing assignment that I give you in that class, let's say that this is the time you're gonna, 1 week you're writing something. You're not allowed to rewrite it. I won't let you read it ahead of time. Because the more you think, the worse it gets. And
Yeah.
creativity, I always say, like, your head is not your friend when you're doing something creative.
Yeah.
You got to come back to it at some point. I
Uh-huh.
wouldn't just suggesting sending out your first draft, but what you need to do, how I think of it, is it's like I send my intellectual self away, put that away, and let my creative self come out. And I really work from my unconscious. And I believe that's where all the good stuff, not just for me, for everybody is. Right? I mean, as a jazz musician, you really know that. You're not looking
Yeah.
at, right? You're not even looking at notes. I mean, you're living in the moment of
Yeah.
it. You
Yeah.
don't have time to overthink it. There is no time.
Nope.
So writing works exactly the same way. But because we haven't taught that in writing, and you're supposed to go over your stuff and over it, and that's good. But there's a time to go over it and over it.
Yeah.
And it's not the beginning. The beginning is the vomit draft,
Yep.
getting it out, seeing what you've got, taking a look at it. Oh, I love this. I thought it was going to be about this, but wow, this is really speaking to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, all the students, fans, everyone around you, but you run the show. What's
Right.
your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Who do I think I am? I think that I'm somebody who has done a lot better in life than they ever imagined that they would do, has been a lot more, kind of embrace the things that when I was growing up, I used to fantasize about, of being fearless, of meeting interesting people, of taking chances. I've traveled a lot. I have a broad range of interest in friends. I mean, that's what I really wanted in life. And I feel like, that that's something that I went after and have accomplished.
Yeah, dream realized. So if anyone wants to reach out to become a writer, they want to delve into your world more, any of the good business, where do they go?
It's Storytelling Lab online, and I do, as I say, a 6-week class. But it's not just for writers. I mean, I don't care where you're working, you need to communicate with
Sure.
people.
Yeah.
And the freer you are, and the more you understand the power of your voice and how to use it, you're going to be good no matter what that is.
Yeah.
So, I've had architects, doctors, a lot of people had no intention of becoming quote unquote writers,
Yeah.
but we all communicate.
Yeah.
And when you're able to own your story, it's going to empower you to do so many different kinds of things.
Yeah. Absolutely it will. This has been wonderful, Bonnie. Thank you so much for your time, for your story, your passion. Best of luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on. This has been really fun.
Yeah, it's been